All right, I think we can get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Alana Hibbert. I'm a career coach with the Talent Match program, and I want to welcome you to Cultivating Student Leadership and Entrepreneurship in Museums, Arts, and Culture. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples on whose lands we are each on today. While we meet on a virtual platform, I wish to acknowledge the importance of the land which we call home. I'm currently speaking to you in North Delta on the traditional territory of the Tsawwassen First Nation, Musqueam First Nation, and other Coast Salish peoples. I invite you to introduce yourself and acknowledge the land you are on in the chat. Just so you know, we are recording this session and we'll be sharing it on our Talent Match student page. Also, if you have questions throughout the session, please feel free to add them to the chat. I'll keep an eye on them as we go along. Before I turn things over to our speaker this afternoon, I'll give a brief introduction to the Talent Match program, which some of you may not be familiar with. Talent Match is a collaboration between the BC Museums Association, the BC Alliance for Arts and Culture, Go2HR, which is the BC Tourism and Hospitality Industries Human Resources Association, as well as ACE-WIL, the Association for Cooperative Education and Work Integrated Learning, BC Yukon. The program is funded by the Ministry of Advanced Education and Skills Training. MATCH stands for Museums, Arts, Tourism, Culture, and Hospitality. And the Talent Match program was developed with the goal of supporting work-integrated learning opportunities in the match sector. Debbie Rees, our project manager for the program, is here with us this afternoon. Her main point of focus is providing support for employers in the sector. We also have a sister program called Talent for Nonprofits, which supports WIL more broadly across the nonprofit sector. Miranda Mislaney, our nonprofit career coordinator, is also joining us this afternoon. You can find more information about Talent Match on our website, where you can access links to career resources, such as tips for WIL students working remotely, our How to Get Hired guide, and previous webinars, including our Arts and Culture Industry Chat. Keep an eye out for our upcoming resource guide for students on finding your own co-op placement, which will be available soon. You can also find my contact information on our webpage if you'd like to set up a one-on-one coaching session. All right, I am now going to hand this session over to our speaker, Jules André-Brown. He is a leadership consultant specializing in the governance of arts organizations. Jules is involved in many local music and visual arts organizations across BC, and his recent graduate work looks at how young people see the future of leadership in arts organizations. Welcome, Jules.
Thanks, everyone, and thanks everyone for being here. I'm so excited. I've got a slide deck to share, so I'm just going to do the old screen share here. So let me know if this works. This works, yeah. Yeah. Hopefully you can see a presentation there. Does that work? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Yeah. So yeah, thanks for having me, and I'm so excited. Someone's waiting here. I'll just admit them, if that's okay. And yeah, I'd like to begin to sharing that I'm on the WSÁNEĆ territories or WSÁNEĆ territories here on the island. And I really appreciate everyone being here, and just a bit of housekeeping that this is meant to be a very relaxing and hopefully informative session. I'm going to focus on the approach to young people in the arts rather than just, completely all practical, but I hope also you kind of get a bit of the philosophical sense. And I'd love to see your face in the chat, but if you're more than welcome to turn off your camera and fold laundry or do yoga or whatever you got to do, I completely understand. And I want to foreground any conversation about the arts can be provocative and in ways people don't expect. And I say that because many people have negative experiences with the arts, and I'm not intending to press on any sore spots or bring up any kind of difficult subject matter, but I do want you to know that it's, again, in the same with turning off your camera or whatever you need, is do take the time and the space you need for what works for you. And do know that, we would be here for you, towards the end of the session. And also at the end of the session, I will be sharing some resources and references. So I'm happy to share those. And also at the end, I'll take questions and comments. You're more than welcome to share your thoughts and in the chat. I would love that. However, the way I've got my screen set up is I can't see what's in the chat. So you'll have to just wait for the end if you've asked a question. But I do want to give one caveat is if there's an accessibility need, I'm more than happy to stop and fix that. So we have two wonderful interpreters here, and I'm very glad they could be here. And do let us know if you have any other accessibility needs. Just as a brief description of myself, I'm a mixed race person. I've got curly hair, a wonderful beard, and I'm wearing a white linen shirt, and I'm in a room with a mirror behind me, which is a very bizarre thing for someone to give a presentation to. So you can always, it ensures that I have to be dressed to do a Zoom presentation. So yeah, thanks for coming. And just a quick bit about myself. I have been involved in a lot of different arts organizations. I've been a musician, I've been a promoter, I've toured doing music, I've toured doing arts, visual arts. I've done all kinds of events. I've been involved in CITR radio as a radio broadcaster. I've been involved in magazine publications and a few different festivals around Vancouver. I'm currently a council member at the BC Arts Council, and that's been a really interesting and wonderful new endeavor for me, and really excited about the change in the council and the approach to putting a more equitable approach to funding the arts in there. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm also a father to two wonderful kids. They may jump in at some point during this session, as they normally do. And that's been real fun. My daughter and I do a lot of sidewalk chalk together. So that's kind of my art that I'm doing these days. And I said I recently completed a master's degree, and the research I did was on how young people are reflected in the arts and what they hope for in the arts. And that'll be the base of this talk today. And I'm just really glad you could come. Part of my research began with a dear friend of mine, Raj Sen, who passed away during the course of the research. Raj and I became friends as teenagers, and we were both into hip hop music and electronic music, and we painted murals and did all kinds of events and explored different types of music making together. And both of us found that the arts and culture that we liked wasn't well reflected in arts organizations. And Raj was a real leader in the arts, running, incredible kind of international galleries, but also local art stuff. And, he was a very accomplished curator and administrator, and he was always looking to sort of see how generations could work together in the arts, and really sort of supported the sort of facilitation between the kind of more activism actions happening in arts organizations, and was really passionate about how that could be reflected in the kind of background of arts organizations. And through our sort of dreaming together, we were hoping to make a study that kind of looked at how to help people, young people, be in a better position to be a part of arts organizations. So I do this research and share this research in memory of Raj, who was a wonderful friend. So why young people, and how did I pick young people, and what age of young people? So why young people age 15 to 25? So in addition to it being the UN's definition of youth, this age range is a great midpoint around many different definitions of young people. It contains people above and below the age of majority here in Canada. And 19 is a bit of a magic number for opportunities in the arts, because as you turn 19, you have access to renting spaces, you have access to credit, you have access to maybe vehicle rentals, so you can actually throw an event. It's quite difficult to throw an event if you're, say, 17. There's a lot of things impeding you there. So we wanted to make sure we got people on both sides of that dimension. And one thing that, the definitions range all the way up to age 40. There's lots of wonderful definitions of what a young person is. I'm age 36, so I think of myself as a young person in many ways, but my voice is not reflected in this work. And I've been very grateful to have people allow me to kind of appreciate and share their voice, but it's not my voice I'm sharing in the inquiry. So I just want to clarify that. And this research started with two very different arts organizations. And one was a centralized arts organization called the Esquimalt Community Arts Hub. And that organization had a physical space, gallery space, and also did workshops, did events, had a sales component. So it was also kind of like a retail space. It had an outdoor mural space. They did lots of projects in and around Esquimalt, but it was very focused on being a hub. And the other organization was the Space Blanket Art Society, which was a youth-led arts organization. And they started as completely decentralized. So their first project was they had a van, and both of these organizations came about during COVID, and they would project artwork for young people throughout the pandemic, safely through a van. So they were kind of traveling around doing arts. And eventually, what's really neat about these two organizations is that over the course of the study, Space Blanket, which was the decentralized one, found a space and stayed they started renting a space and centralized their operations. And Esquimalt, the Community Arts Hub, decided to decentralize and become available to the public in a kind of more open and less connected to one space kind of way. So that's quite an interesting thing, and we'll touch back on the implications of that a little bit later. But I just want to put that in the frame there. The next thing I want to point out is that even though these two organizations were only a couple kilometers apart, you could walk to where they were kind of stayed at. This study really helped me see that there is a challenge in how young people are reflected in arts cultural planning. And here on the screen, you've got two places, and you can see that the figure in the middle doesn't fit quite perfectly into that. And one of the things I came across is that your cultural life is doesn't exactly fit into a jurisdiction, and often I would meet people who lived in different places. To give you an example, someone might have lived at their parents' house in Esquimalt, but they go to school in Victoria, and they may have belonged to the Wasanich Nation. So, there could be all kinds of configurations, and your geographic life might not fit into a regional planning system, and the school boards and municipalities just aren't set up for that kind of collaboration. And they're trying, but it's just not there yet. So it really pointed out a kind of challenge there, and they're just not flexible enough. And I'm not sure exactly what exactly what our arts systems perfectly set up for. It does seem kind of set up maybe for like home ownership or for citizens of a certain region, but it's not set up directly for young people. A little bit about the methodology of this research is one thing, a big learning for me was that in order to look for young people in the arts and support young people in the arts, the young people really asked me, and more so the university, to be very flexible. So the research practice we used, some people are really comfortable in groups. Some people were comfortable on their own. Some people needed an adult in the space. And that shifted. There were people who seemed quite nervous at first, but then once they kind of got together with their peers, were very talkative and able to really take on this research and had new ideas for research. And the thing that was powerful for me in my experience is that young people really benefit from proximity to each other in research. And that's quite a different than the design of research where you're asking a survey and you're asking for people for their individual ideas. In this case, a lot of people asked for being in a collective, which was really quite beautiful. And I was really glad to see that. So the findings of this inquiry, what did we find out? The findings mapped that there's benefits, barriers, and opportunities that young people saw for themselves and their communities in the arts. And I'll read these out and you can perhaps tell me if they resonate with you in the chat. And again, I would love to check it out at the end, but I'm super curious if these make sense to anyone else here. So young people feel the arts offer new opportunities to build relationships, experiences for learning and discovery, and enable collaboration between people. They recognize the arts as an opportunity to prototype social change. They want to create a culture that supports young people. The young people feel they do not have a space in the arts and would like to engage as a collective. Young people feel competing priorities, demands, and pressures in the arts, and also from their teachers and from their families and from next door neighbors and all kinds of people, and perceive arts education at times as rigid, prescriptive, expensive, and competitive. And that obviously creates a barrier. And they would like to find arts programming that is not limited by funding. So yeah, if those speak to you, I'd love to hear that. Or if you're like, that's not my experience, I'd also love to hear that too. But for the purpose of this session today, I'd just like to focus on the top two about building relationships and collaboration, and recognizing that the arts are an opportunity for prototyping social change. And I want to read a quote from the study, and it says, "I feel like society puts a lot of value into young people, but don't give them opportunities. Everyone is trying to look younger, be younger, act younger, but then they aren't giving young people the space to just exist." The other quote, "Honestly, the most meaningful experience I have is doing stuff like markets or art shows, which is all by youth, just because the space is for us and by us." And these quotes really illustrate the two findings about how young people are looking for spaces to take part in the arts, but also value spaces made by them. And it leads us to the conclusions, which is largely, the research and the literature out there agrees with young people in this study that young people value the arts and want to be engaged in arts organizations to make meaningful ways. They want to be involved in cultural and heritage work. The existing structures and processes inside cultural work currently limit people's opportunity to engage meaningfully in the arts and arts organizations. And in addition, young people see the arts as this place or the opportunity to sort of facilitate radical change by using arts-based practices to sort of help foreshadow kind of a new world. And they like to do that collectively. And for today, I'm going to start us with the first one, which young people value what the arts offer and want to be engaged in the arts in meaningful and diverse ways. And to look at this challenge, I want to draw on the work of some scholars from Vancouver, Toronto, and London, which is listed up there at the top, Points et al. And I'll put the reference at the end here. And what's listed here is that young people have been doing arts and culture and heritage work, at least have been doing something where they want to be empowering people, or at least hoping to. And they want organizations that are focused on empowerment, and they want to help young people be creative and speak up about social issues. They want the criteria to be flexible and open, accessible to anybody, and no cost or very low cost. And young people want kind of unrestricted activities in the arts. They don't want to be sort of subservient to the demands of what a school board wants or the demands of what the city planner wants. They want to kind of do the work that makes sense for them. And to put this into an example, if you imagine sort of something like a public mural project, in sort of the empowered organization, it would look something like people are invited to share their issues or to paint murals on whatever they think makes sense on their own aesthetic interests, or to talk about issues like climate change or racism. And they want to take part regardless of cost or even be paid to do that work. And while they might welcome some inspiration, they certainly don't want to be told you'll be painting, murals that we say you're going to paint, right? On the other hand, there's sort of a paradox there that Points et al. Talk about, is that in the last few decades, there are a number of issues facing arts organizations and how young people take part in those. And they reference that the partnerships and guidance from funders and governing bodies and partners, they really push towards sort of a socialization or an economic benefit. And there's times where that's good, but they also mention that this socialization focuses really makes things sort of sound like the market, or get people to start talking about employability, and at times that can kind of rub the artist and the young people and the community. It can all kind of create a bit of friction. So given that sort of mural concept there, like this might be, do a mural in order to become more employable, or do a mural to beautify a business. Further, some arts organizations might use a targeted criteria, so they might narrow their scope to focus on just one group. And that, for an example, that might be like a mental health, people that experience a mental health diagnosis, or you have to prove your clinically proven health diagnosis. And this would, while it might allow the organization to serve people in more precise ways, it would put young people at risk of not being able to take part because they'd be pathologized or excluded because they don't have a registered diagnosis. So, and the third is that an organization or environment might be struggling to make the decision between, paying artists and being an arts-focused organization, or focusing on their development so they can do the same work next year. So they have to choose between a grant writer and, doing some sort of arts-based work. And that is a paradox, I think, that a lot of people experience some variation of that. So whether it's the wanting to expand your criteria, or wanting to do a more empowered work, but sort of having to change the focus, or this sort of paradox where you have to become a good grant writer in order to do good artwork. So I'm sure people can empathize with that a bit. I want to note that these states aren't static, and they're shifting and changing all the time. So you may see and feel this, that even in long-term stable organizations, things can shift. And today there's been a second announcement around the Royal BC Museum, right? And that they're undertaking this mammoth change. And it was once a very stabilized organization in one city. And now they are going to close the museum and rebuild it. And but also the exhibitions will be roaming throughout the province. And there'll be more processes towards repatriation and rather than collections. And there'll be all kinds of changes going on in that. So, even in something that seems like, well, that would never change, that's a static environment, those things can change. And I think the Esquimalt Community Arts Hub and Space Blanket are examples that, these organizations do change. And I think what's important is all young people, and I think all the people that support young people in the arts are going to be called to use an entrepreneurial mindset that, we're going to have to figure out our tolerance and capacity for that change. And to some extent, some intuition for your tolerance and capacity will serve you in your career and supporting others in their career. Because there are times where, you might be willing to go through a bit of being constrained. And there are times where, a healthy relationship with the organization might look more empowering, and you might have to find ways to sort of make that work. So we'll look at a few of those hallmarks of a good organization in just a moment here, and want to just focus on the recommendations that people in this study talked about. The young people in this study, we covered the sort of paradoxes in policy, and that young people are quite passionate about sort of using a shift in the arts to sort of facilitate social change. But young people also want to be a part of arts organizations that compensate them for their efforts, and that's well documented in the literature. And I think that they also want a relationship with the arts that's different than the sort of student-teacher role. It's or mentor young person role. They want a meaningful role in the arts. And so I'll look at a bit of research that talks about that and explores those ideas. And this is from the author Nicholas Sim, who's wrote this terrific book on partnerships and the galleries and young people. I'm paraphrasing her work here, but she recounts that many arts organizations have done a lot of work on doing a one-time project. And it's often they'll commission a young person to get involved with their organization for a limited time, or they'll commission a young artist to get into the gallery space for a short period. And there's a bit of fatigue that comes along with that, because there's quite a bit of work to sort of build up young people into the gallery or attract young people into the arts, and everyone's excited about it, and then it doesn't get the traction that people are looking for. And she attributes this to a reliance on the commission strategy rather than a stronger opportunity in the arts. And she said organizations that really focus on making the investment for a younger generation to be a part of the operations and in the governance are better served, and they know how to deliver programming better, and makes for a warmer workspace for everyone. And what was so fascinating about Sim's research is that it also sort of suggests that, like, it's not just good for young people, it's good for the whole organization to have a new generation come forward. So I really recommend Sim's work. And I want to look at the sort of three ingredients Nicholas Sim talked about, and she really argued that the future of arts work across the world should really focus on a capacity for young people. And that's, you know, she's remarking on the civic systems like our cultural plans, our arts and culture councils, our school boards. They need to be resourced well enough to maintain the opportunities and collaboration for young people in the arts. And the other part is she talks about a respect for young people's collective wisdom and for sort of youth leaders and youth work that's being done. And the final concept is a thing she refers to as intelligibility, which is the first time I had heard of that word, but it's somewhere between intuition and knowledge. And what Sim's calling for with the word intelligibility is to kind of have the ability to have knowledge about what young people in the arts have tried and what's worked, and why would we do that? Why not this? Why that? So yeah, those three things would make for in Sim's view, a great kind of future. The other thing I want to talk about is the arts that young people do. It's important to recognize that young people do a creative work that often goes unrecognized or is misrecognized. And we tend to refer to arts, culture, and heritage work through the fine arts like painting and sculpture, but we discount that many young people are emerging with arts like crochet or making memes or TikTok dances and or skateboarding. And because these art forms are collective, they tend to be discounted. And I want to highlight the research of Kira Gray in Vancouver, who looked at young people in skateboarding. And there's a lot of practices within skateboarding that that I think the visual arts or the performing arts would be very proud of and would be very happy, such as performing in and around public and reimagining public spaces like a staircase as a place to have fun and socialize. And it's a practice that can also be done in solitude, or it's a practice that you can transport with you, you can do collectively. And it often gets misrepresented as just a sport for young American dudes. And in reality, there's quite a wonderful burgeoning and history of quite a wide diversity of people doing skateboarding. And you know, it's often translated through zines or through word of mouth. And because it kind of has a media image, we forget that that skateboarding is quite a young person's art and not just like a, you know, a hobby, right? And so I think it's important to say, when we come across things like hating skateboarding, or you see places that hate skateboarding, it's maybe a red flag for their relationship with young people and might be a first step towards repairing that rapport. So what are some first steps? I really can't say enough that you know, taking the time to listen and build trust with young people is so critical. And if you're a young person, you know, finding places that will hear you is so critical. Almost everyone from the research said that that it was quite rare to have those long form conversations with adults about being heard, and it was often hard for adults to shut up and listen to young people, right? It's in the professional world, we have roundtables, and you're expected to be very snappy and kind of have your opinion ready, and grafting that approach onto young people, that can't be great all the time. It sometimes doesn't create the dialogue that young people need to be a part of culture. But I think making the effort for it is, in my experience, always works, or you know, pays dividends. And I want to talk about the mentorship and advocacy of young people in the arts, as well as that in the decentralized model, there might be more of a weight towards advocacy, and in the centralized model, you know, there might be more of a weight towards mentorship. But those things need to be flexible, and you know, you might switch from advocacy to mentorship back and forth, or you know, how you conceptualize mentorship and advocacy might need to change. So at times, young people need to be mentoring each other and advocating for each other, and at times it's the adults doing it with young people or on their behalf. And you know, sometimes it's young people to adults, but you know, you want to have some flexibility and solidarity in that approach. And I think that's quite wise to have that, and clearly shapes you know, a good experience. Another hallmark I'd like to sort of just share with you is like seeing young people for their entire kind of social and economic context. And we can't always know it, but there's a distinction when you assume young people can just fit into an arts organization the way a mid-career professional can, or the sort of other extreme where you assume youth leadership is some sort of absence of guidance or any interference with adults. It should be a with model rather than a, you know, completely hands-off, or at least, if you can't be, you know, doing it with, recognizing that people come with a full, they need a full kind of world. And this model that comes out of the Royal Roads Resilience by Design Lab is a good example of a contemporary model where it views young people as full citizens. So there, you know, looks at both the culture context, the processes, the partnerships, the places, and the purposes, and sees young people as sort of full citizens. And going back to that sort of placemaking map, it's more than just their, you know, their region. It's all the different dynamics of it, right? Like which communities, which networks, how do they want to feel belonging? How do they want to see sustainability, and which places do they want to be in? In regards to how we want to see people take leadership roles, I want to be clear that there are some practices that we really need to be critical of, and because they could be causing some unintended harm. And both in the interviews and in the literatures, I came across this phenomenon of people being feeling really bad about it, their experience with you know, applying to arts grants or doing some arts work. And you know, this there's kind of a diminishing returns effect here, and I call it, if you don't win, you don't get in. And to frame this idea, I want to share the example of the youth laureate model, where when we offer an opportunity to a young person to be a youth leader or to do some sort of youth art, we get 100 people to apply. We don't just get one youth leader, we get 99 people who were rejected. And this wouldn't be so bad if it was just like a sweepstakes, but, you know, or there was other meaningful opportunities. But often we ask people to pour their heart into this work, and they may get rejected via email, or worse, they hear something like, "We just don't see potential in this," and that can be very hard if you're, you know, bringing your entire kind of cultural background into an application, and you know, that can really create some animosity and distrust. And the tragedy is, without that feedback, you know, these projects or the creative spirit behind it, I think gets diminished. And furthermore, you know, as time goes on, you're competing against people who have won grants, and they tend to win more. And I think we all know how overwhelming researching the grant cycles are, and the due dates and the language and the opportunity, and it leads with people very discouraged. And it leaves with a few others, you know, getting kind of very great positive reinforcing feedback, but kind of a distance from their peers. The good news is I think there's some solidarity and practices alive already, and just alert us to that is that one of the most consistent calls for action from young people from this research was to find organizations that help them match to other opportunities. And ACE-WIL and Talent Match are just great examples of that. And, what so many people said they were looking for is just like a list or some connection point to be like, where can I go to look for opportunities? How do I not have to reinvent the wheel? How can I get into that culture of learning what I need to be a part of it? Because it does feel like it's being kept behind the gate. And in some cases, maybe it is, but there are, it was kind of a wonderful cultural benefit when people are able to participate in the arts. And a lot of groups across this province are hosting job boards and grant deadlines, and very proud of sort of, Talent Match and ACE-WIL. And there are other groups doing it: Arts BC, Creative Coast, Heritage BC, BC Museums Association, the Arts Council, of course. And I think they're making their memberships and the opportunities very low cost, or they're hosting free events. So it's a really great time for a bit more collective solidarity there, and something's emerging, and there's some real intention on being more focused there. So yeah, and that wraps us up to the sort of the academic side of this this work, and I appreciate everyone for listening. So I just want to acknowledge the young people that took part in this, and Talent Match and ACE-WIL for putting this together, and of course Raj Sen, Laura Beth, and Demi London, who were all instrumental in the arts organization parts of this, and of course the academic supervisors who supported here, who are all wonderful scholars. And this is the reference slide here, and I can also post it in the chat, because I know sometimes that's a bit easier to get it in the chat, and then you have the links there, so I'll post it there. This is my name. If you ever need to connect with me down the line, I'm happy to open it up for some dialogue. But if you're like, oh, I want to ask him a question, 2 hours later, or whenever later, feel free. And you can find me on LinkedIn or wherever you think. I'm all over the place. And yeah, so I'm open for dialogue here. And Alana, I'd love to kind of pass it back to you and to the group. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. That was great. Very insightful. I see we have a question in the chat. Around volunteerism. Wondering if you could speak a little bit about the role of volunteerism for youth in arts organizations. Do they see value in volunteering? Has there been a decline in youth volunteering in the arts?
I think, it might be different for different sectors. And from what I hear, I think there generally is, or there's at least a lot of gaps there. I think there's probably some bright spots where, there are some opportunities. And unfortunately, I think it kind of comes in with that commission thing where there's, a great opportunity, there's kind of some action for a while. And then, in the course of this study that I was doing, one of the arts leaders, I also interviewed a bunch of adults as well who were parts of arts organizations, said that, they were funded to have a youth program, and it was burgeoning, and then that funding got cut. And then so the youth leader on site wasn't there, and it just sort of fell apart. And it's, without that sort of ongoing support, it does kind of crash. And that seems to be a pretty common thing. So I would say, though, that there are some great young people doing their own projects without the sort of institution support. And that's super cool. And one thing I just really want to encourage is that it can be so disheartening to not get involved in the arts, but that practice of creating your own project and doing your own project on your own terms with your own colleagues and friends and is great. And I think you should do it. And it's so inspiring. And you might be able to transport that somewhere else. So you might have to volunteer and do it. One thing that I'm remarking on or just thinking of is I have someone I used to volunteer with, a friend of mine, Maya, who did a really great library, like a Vancouver Black library, like all Black literature in a library. And there was no real like grant for it. There's no support for it. It probably should be something that the Arts Council funds or the city funds, but it just, just wasn't there. But, she took it upon herself to just do it. And, it's great. If you look at it now, it's just like on fire. It's amazing. But and I think now people are like, oh, let me fund that. Let me support that. They want to. So, you might have to volunteer something before it comes about. It would be great if we as organizations could find a way to sort of support that passion in advance rather than being on the catch-up side to it.
Great, thank you. I had a question actually about, you were talking about flexibility being identified as an important factor for young people participating and being involved in the arts. Did you come across any specific things that organizations have been doing, like in terms of implementing policies or practices around flexibility to sort of attract more young people and students to greater participation and potential leadership opportunities within those organizations?
Yeah, and the answer might be a little surprising. It's food. It's and it's not just food. It's like it's more than food. But it was like, there's examples of leaders that were just cool, leisurely people who would provide food and were there consistently and showed up and, were personable and kind of non-confrontational and provided food. And there's examples of leaders that were like trying to create a formula for success, right? And they were starting with like a very robust kind of like, okay, we're going to get you in, and day 2, we're going to get you signed up for XYZ, and day 3. And I think it overwhelmed people. And there's so many other dynamics, like someone might have gone through a project themselves and they feel comfortable in the gallery space, but if their colleagues and friends don't feel comfortable, like they just won't come back, right? Or they get discouraged from thinking that this could be a place for them. So the way that seemed to work sort of consistently was creating a kind of cultural space that was very relaxed and leisurely. And it's a bit against what we kind of might want, because it's so slow, right? It's, oh, we'll just have a snack. We'll just be there and maybe people will show up. Like that feels terrible to someone who's starting an event, that you've got to just show up until they come. But all the youth groups I talked to that do arts works in BC, a similar thing happened where they were like, we started and we had probably 10 sessions where like 2 people came, and then that exploded to 15, right? And there's sort of a magic number that changed. So uncomfortable truth, I think, for many of us that want to do that, and time too. You can't expect it's going to be, you post something and say the deadline's a month away. It's just too short of a time for young people. It might be fine for an established artist, but you would probably want to really expand that time. So time and food and space.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Feel free to put them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask the question as well. All right. Well, I don't see any more questions. So I'm fine to leave it there. We're coming up.
Alana, I just popped a question in the
Oh,
chat.
I'm so sorry. Did I miss that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I see what I did. I accidentally sent it to only one person. So
Oh.
my question was just about if there were tips on how to connect with youth, like channels or other ways to that arts organizations can connect with youth, either to promote opportunities to present or display, or volunteer calls, or if they're looking for youth to join their board or a committee, etc.
Yeah, and so the thing that kind of kept coming across was that a trusting adult is really helpful. Like that was a very universal thing. And one of the things that surprised me was the reluctance around social media for young people. I guess I had always kind of believed this stereotype that young people are all on their social medias, right? Like, and that was just like not the reality that I experienced in this study, that many young people, they didn't have a complete comfort on social media. They didn't, many of them didn't have accounts across all the different platforms. They might have had one. They, their usage of it wasn't, their skill on sort of like, where do I find, that account? That wasn't there. So that was a bit of a surprise to me. So, I was kind of under this assumption like, oh, you could just go search YYJ arts and that those people would look there. But that wasn't the case. However, there is so much that a trusting leader can do for young people. Like, it's very cool to just see the sort of like when there is that trust sort of built, that can kind of rally a group of people together. But there's also a funny interaction where like that group has to decide if they're taking part. So, if you present something to a group, you might need to come back a couple of times. But the good news of that is, once the connection's made, it's like, it's a very good connection, and those young people will kind of co-sign other young people to get involved. But it is, again, kind of that sort of like food and time kind of thing. It's not as simple as posting it through a channel, and not as simple as through social media. And in fact, I did a wide social media campaign for recruitment for this, and it was almost always through mentors that this went through. I was very fortunate that UVic, the library, had this on every computer during happened during the pandemic. But any student that walked by, they were able to like scan a QR code and get assigned to it. And I don't think we got one person through the computer bank, right? It was, but the gallery at UVic was great. Like, they directly contacted people, and those people directly contacted me. Yeah, and maybe one other thing about that is that I was surprised how much how tight those arts communities are. And so, there's so much kind of gatekeeping in those communities that, like, if you I was surprised how many people I would email and it'd be the same person responding, because they were like, oh, I'm the ED here, I'm the volunteer coordinator here, I'm the like board member here. I'm like, what? I've talked to you like 5 times on 5 different organizations. So that was interesting too, that like there it might suggest that there needs to be a bit more changing of the guard for those organizations. And this is kind of getting away from your question, Debbie, but like, I think if those organizations are really entrenched and they have people on their board for 5, 10 years, 15 years, it's like, what young person would want to join that, right? Like, there's no space for them to breathe and to enjoy that. They can very quickly get a read on like, I don't belong here. So you have to kind of change the vibe so that it feels like people can be in control, and that might mean just as adults. Not me though, I keep talking. So,
That's great. Well, if there are no other questions, we are coming up to the hour. So thank you for joining. Thanks again, Jules, for a very insightful presentation. And if there are any questions that anybody has and want to follow up, please send me an email at ahibbert@uvic.ca. And I'm happy to pass along any of those questions as well to Jules if they're unable to contact him directly. Thanks, everyone, and we'll hopefully see you soon. Bye-bye.
bye. Thanks again.